Ryan spent 2 years turning a rundown house into a dream home for him and his wife, Lauren. But the night she returned from a girls' trip, something in her eyes told him everything had changed. What she didn't know, he already knew the truth. And the revenge he had planned, it wasn't cruel, it was permanent. Ryan Carter stood alone in the kitchen of the home he'd spent the last 2 years rebuilding from the ground up. What had once been a decaying structure now held the quiet confidence of his craftsmanship. Every beam, every fixture, every nail was a product of his hands. It wasn't just about construction, it was about creating something permanent. Something for the life he was building with Lauren. He checked the clock. 6:47 p.m. Her flight had landed over an hour ago. No word yet. Not unusual, maybe, but lately even the ordinary had started to feel off. 3 days earlier, Lauren had left for a weekend trip to Charleston with her closest friends to celebrate turning 30. They'd been planning it for months. Ryan supported it. He knew how important those friendships were to her. Still, something about this trip had unsettled him. The weeks leading up to her departure had been strange. She'd grown quieter, hesitant when he brought up long-term plans, especially the topic of kids. That used to excite her. Now she dodged it or offered vague, non-committal responses. She wasn't angry or distant in the obvious sense, just different, like her mind was somewhere else. At first, Ryan blamed himself. Maybe he'd been too focused on work. Maybe the renovation had taken too much of his energy. But deep down, it didn't feel like a rift caused by routine. It felt personal, like something was happening just beneath the surface. He thought back to the early years. Meeting Lauren at her brother's backyard barbecue felt like fate. He remembered how she'd talked about teaching with so much purpose. Like she wasn't just working a job, she was shaping lives. He admired that. It made his own work feel more meaningful by comparison. Together they built something solid. No drama, no guessing, just trust. They got married 2 years after that first meeting. It wasn't a big wedding. They didn't need one. What they had was quiet but full. They made time for each other. They communicated, or at least they used to. Now, standing in the same kitchen where they used to cook together, laugh, share plans for the future, Ryan felt like a stranger in his own home. He didn't want to admit it, but he'd started noticing signs long before this weekend. She'd begun taking her phone into the bathroom. She'd changed the passcode last month, first time in 5 years. She brushed it off, said it was because of student confidentiality. It made sense, but something about her tone hadn't. Then there was the way she'd responded when he brought up remodeling the second bedroom into a nursery. She smiled, but her expression stayed frozen. No excitement, just an awkward silence followed by a subject change. He had told himself not to overthink it, but he knew better. He'd built bridges for a living. He understood how stress revealed weak points, and what he was seeing now looked dangerously close to collapse. Ryan wasn't impulsive. He was measured, methodical. But 5 days before the trip, after yet another deflection about their future, he did something he never imagined he would. He hired a private investigator. It felt wrong, dishonest. But the anxiety had become too much. He needed clarity. Not accusations, not assumptions, facts. The investigator was discreet. No wiretaps, no invasions of privacy, just surveillance during the trip. Ryan justified it to himself as a final attempt to clear the air. He hoped he was wrong. He hoped he'd get a report full of nothing, photos of brunches, sightseeing, harmless girl talk. That's what he wanted. Instead, the file arrived that morning. The envelope was plain. The contents weren't. Ryan hadn't opened it right away. He sat with it on the table for nearly an hour, hands still, mind racing. When he finally pulled the photos out, his heart sank. There was no ambiguity. There was Lauren at a waterfront cafe, sitting close to a man he didn't recognize. They weren't just talking. They were leaning in, smiling in that way you don't smile at strangers. Other photos followed, more of them walking side by side, stopping by a boutique, sitting at dinner. No kisses, no public displays that screamed infidelity. But it didn't have to be explicit. Her body language said everything. It was the same openness she used to reserve for Ryan, and now it was aimed at someone else. Still, there was a slim chance she would come home and confess. That she'd break down, explain everything. That it was nothing. Or maybe it was something, but not something permanent. Maybe there was still a way to fix it. He hadn't decided yet what he would say. He just knew they couldn't avoid the conversation any longer. He glanced at the door. The sound of tires crunching the gravel driveway pulled him out of his thoughts. She was home. Ryan took a deep breath, wiped his hands on the towel again, and stepped back from the table. The plates were already set. The wine was breathing. The candles were lit, not for romance, but because he needed something warm to hold on to. He stood still, heart pounding, not with anticipation, but with dread. The doorknob turned. Everything was about to change. Lauren's trip to Charleston wasn't her first getaway with her college friends, but this one felt different. Maybe it was the timing. They were all turning 30, hitting that invisible line between figuring it out and you should have it figured out by now. The weekend wasn't just about celebration. It was about taking stock of the lives they'd built, or hadn't. From the moment they arrived at the beach rental, Lauren tried to relax. She poured drinks, joined in the laughter, forced smiles where they didn't come naturally. But she couldn't shake the weight in her chest. Conversations drifted from funny dating stories to life goals, and eventually to children. That was when she froze up. She listened, nodded, but kept quiet. The questions had stopped being hypothetical. Jessica noticed, of course. She always did. She leaned in, glass in hand, voice just low enough for Lauren to hear. "You're too young to lock yourself into a script someone else wrote," she said. "Don't you ever think about doing something for you? Something crazy?" Lauren gave a weak smile. "I love Ryan. I want a family." "I'm not saying you don't," Jessica said. "But when was the last time you felt like your own person?" Lauren didn't answer. She didn't have one. The next day, while exploring downtown, the group stopped at a busy cafe. That's when they met Derek and his friend. It started innocently enough. Jessica made a joke about the line being too long, and one of the guys offered to share their table. Within minutes, drinks were ordered, chairs rearranged, and conversations split off. Derek was the kind of guy who made everything sound interesting, even the mundane. He asked questions, personal ones, but not in a way that felt invasive. Lauren told herself it was just small talk, but she knew better. The way he looked at her wasn't casual, and she didn't look away. Jessica, of course, saw everything. Afterwards, she gave Lauren a knowing look. "It's just flirting. You're allowed to talk to people. You're married, not buried." Lauren laughed it off, but she felt a ripple of guilt. Still, when she got a text later that evening, Derek asking if they'd all be at the same restaurant again, she didn't delete it. She showed Jessica instead. Jessica's response, "You're not doing anything wrong. He's just a guy. You're just being human." Dinner that night felt like a test. Lauren kept reminding herself it was nothing. A meal, with friends, in public. But when Derek showed up again, alone this time, she felt her chest tighten. She should have left. She didn't. Instead, she let herself talk. Let him listen. Let the wine dull her hesitation. Every laugh, every shared glance chipped away at the lines she knew she shouldn't cross. And when Jessica leaned over and whispered, "You look happy for the first time in months," Lauren didn't deny it. After dinner, the group split up. Some went back to the rental. Jessica lingered. So did Derek. The three of them stood under the glow of a street lamp, the city humming around them. Jessica gave Lauren a long look. "Whatever's going on in your head, you get one life," she said. "If this is your moment, don't waste it thinking about what you'll regret. Just live it." Lauren didn't speak. She didn't have to. Jessica left first. Derek didn't. What happened next was a blur. A walk, a conversation, a moment of weakness. Lauren crossed the line, not dramatically, not with fireworks, quietly, deliberately. A decision made in silence, knowing full well she couldn't take it back. The next morning, guilt came fast. Derek was gone. Jessica didn't ask questions. Neither did the others. Lauren kept her head down the entire drive back. Her phone buzzed twice. Ryan asking what time she'd be home. She replied with a vague, "soon." When she finally pulled into the driveway, her stomach turned. Everything she'd tried to suppress on the trip came roaring back. The house looked the same, but it no longer felt like home. She reached for the handle and paused. Her heart raced. Her palms were damp. She told herself she could lie, or maybe confess, or maybe pretend it didn't happen. She opened the door. Ryan stood in the kitchen. Dinner was on the table. 2 plates, 2 glasses. Everything in place except for them. He didn't say anything. Neither did she. Not yet. Because what Lauren didn't know was that Ryan already had the truth. The door clicked shut behind Lauren. She stood still for a beat, as if unsure whether to walk in or walk back out. Ryan didn't move. He was standing by the dining table, eyes locked on her like he'd been rehearsing this moment. "Hey," she said, her voice soft, casual, but her eyes flicked quickly across the room, catching the careful arrangement of dinner on the table, the wine, the candles. She swallowed hard. Ryan didn't return the greeting. She took a step closer. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic out of Charleston was brutal." He still didn't answer. Her hand touched the back of one of the chairs. "Did you wait long?" Ryan's jaw tightened. He nodded once, then pulled out a chair, not to offer it to her, but to sit. He looked up at her and said quietly, "We need to talk." Lauren's expression faltered. "Okay, sure. What's going on?" He didn't answer right away. He took a long breath and looked at her, not the way he used to. There was no warmth, no curiosity, just clarity, resigned but resolute. "Something happened this weekend," he said. "Something I hoped I was wrong about." Lauren blinked. "What are you talking about?" He didn't flinch. "I hired someone to follow you." The words landed like a punch. Her mouth opened slightly, but she didn't speak. "I didn't want to," he continued. "I felt like a terrible person even considering it, but something in me said I had to know. I needed the truth." Lauren looked away, her body tensed. "I have pictures, Lauren," he said, voice low. "You and him, at the cafe, on the boardwalk, at dinner. I know everything." The air in the room shifted. She didn't ask who he meant. She didn't ask what pictures. She knew exactly what he was talking about. She sat down slowly, staring at her hands. "Ryan, I didn't plan it. It just happened. I wasn't thinking clearly." He leaned back. "You weren't thinking clearly? You weren't thinking about me? About us?" "I was scared," she said quickly. "About the future. About everything. I felt like I was losing who I was." He shook his head. "So you found yourself in someone else's hotel room?" Her eyes welled up. "Please don't do this." "Don't do what?" he said, voice rising for the first time. "Don't react to my wife cheating on me?" "I didn't mean to hurt you," she said, almost whispering. "It didn't mean anything. I felt alone. I felt trapped, and Jessica kept pushing." "Don't blame Jessica," he snapped. "She didn't take vows with me. You did." Lauren's breath caught in her throat. Ryan stood up and walked to the other side of the room. "I wanted this to be wrong. I prayed you'd prove me paranoid. I set the table. I made dinner. I gave you one last chance to come home and tell me the truth." She stared at the floor. "I didn't know how." "I gave you everything," he said. "Not just this house. Not just my time. I believed in you more than I believed in anyone." "I know," she said, barely audible. "No, you don't. Because if you did, you wouldn't have thrown it away." The room fell silent again. Ryan paced slowly, then turned back toward her. "You said it meant nothing. If that's true, then what does that make me?" She had no answer. "I can't do this," he said finally. "I can't look at you and pretend this didn't happen." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't try to stop him. "I'm filing for divorce tomorrow," Ryan said. "I want it clean. No fighting. Just done." Her voice trembled. "Please, Ryan." "No," he said sharply. "You made your choice. Now I'm making mine." He walked out of the room. Lauren stayed seated, staring at the table he'd set with such care, now untouched. The candles flickered and died out on their own. Ryan didn't sleep that night. He sat on the couch for hours, staring at nothing. The house was quiet, but his mind wasn't. Every sound, the ticking clock, the creak of old floorboards, felt louder in the silence Lauren had left behind. She stayed in the guest room. At some point during the night, he heard her crying. He didn't go to her. By morning, his decision hadn't changed. When he entered the living room, she was still there. Same spot, same posture, same red eyes. She looked like she hadn't moved. He stood by the doorway for a moment before speaking. "I'm seeing a lawyer today." Lauren nodded. "I understand." He didn't soften. "I don't want drama, just signatures. Then we can move on." She wiped her face and said quietly, "I'm not going to fight you. I deserve this." Ryan looked at her for a long moment. "You're right. You do." He didn't wait for her to say anything else. He grabbed his keys and left. The drive to the lawyer's office felt longer than it was. Every street reminded him of a memory. Their favorite coffee shop, the park where they used to walk on Sundays, the store where they'd picked out paint samples for the house. None of it felt real anymore, like it belonged to someone else's life. The lawyer was professional, efficient. Ryan answered questions, signed documents, nodded through explanations. When it was over, he sat in the car and let himself feel something he hadn't since the confrontation. Grief, not for Lauren, for what they used to be. He didn't go home right away. He drove around for hours. When he finally returned, Lauren was gone. She'd left a short note on the counter. "I'll stay at my brother's for now. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I didn't want to make it harder on you." He didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. In the days that followed, Ryan threw himself into routine. Work, gym, sleep. He avoided their old places, stopped answering mutual friends. He didn't want pity. He didn't want advice. He just wanted out. Then 2 weeks later, a message changed everything. It was from David, Lauren's brother. They hadn't spoken since the separation. "Ryan, I don't want to make things worse, but you need to know. Lauren is pregnant." Ryan froze. He reread the message 3 times. Pregnant? His first thought was denial. But then came the dates, the timing. The baby was likely his. David followed up with a second message. "She didn't plan to tell you right away. She just found out. But she's keeping it. And she's not asking for anything. I just thought you deserved to know." Ryan didn't reply. He stared at the screen until it dimmed in his hand. That night, he didn't sleep either. In the morning, he didn't feel anger, just confusion. The pain was still there, but it was mixed now with something else. Uncertainty, possibility. He spent the next few days in a haze. He told no one. At work, he went through the motions. At night, he lay awake, thinking about fatherhood, about what it would mean to raise a child with someone he no longer trusted. He remembered the conversations they used to have, about names, nurseries, how they'd raise a kid to be kind, smart, honest. It was supposed to be a shared dream. Now it was tangled in betrayal. A week later, he called David. "How is she?" Ryan asked. David didn't dodge it. "Trying to rebuild. She's going to therapy. She cut off Jessica. She's not making excuses." Ryan let the words settle. "She's not asking for you to come back," David added. "She just wants to raise the baby the right way." Ryan said nothing for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "I'm not doing this for her, but that kid, I'm not going to leave them behind." "I didn't expect you to," David replied. "You've always been the steady one." After the call ended, Ryan sat for a long time in silence. For the first time since everything fell apart, he didn't feel stuck. He still hurt, but there was clarity now. He wasn't going back, but he wasn't walking away either. 3 months had passed since the divorce papers were filed. Ryan had relocated to Raleigh. New apartment, new job, new everything. It wasn't easy. Some days still hurt more than others, especially the quiet ones. But the distance helped. It gave him room to breathe, to think without feeling like every corner of his life was still haunted by Lauren. But the thought of the baby never left him. He hadn't spoken to Lauren directly since the confrontation. Everything had gone through David. Medical updates, due dates, appointment summaries. Lauren wasn't pushing for contact. That made it easier for Ryan to process things on his own timeline. Then one afternoon, he walked past a children's store on his way home. He wasn't planning to stop, but something about the rows of tiny shoes in the window made him freeze. He stepped inside, barely aware of what he was doing. He didn't buy anything. He just looked. He went home that night and sat down with a blank notepad. For the first time since the fallout, he wrote. It wasn't a letter to Lauren or a plan for court. It was a list. Things he wanted to teach his child. Things he wanted to say. Promises he wasn't ready to make out loud, but still felt he needed to make privately. By the end of the week, he made a decision. He called Lauren. She answered, hesitant. Ryan, I want to talk, he said. Not about us. About the baby? There was a pause, then a quiet, okay. They met the following Sunday in a neutral place, a cafe halfway between their cities. No accusations, no emotional outbursts. Just two people trying to make sense of a future neither of them had expected. Lauren looked tired. She seemed smaller somehow, not physically, but in presence. More restrained, humbled. I'm not here to rehash the past, Ryan said once they sat down. I just want to figure out how to do this right. I didn't think you'd want to be involved, she admitted. I didn't know if I did, he replied honestly. But it's not about you. It's about them. I'm not going to be a part-time name on a form. I want to be there. Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't cry. She nodded. They didn't make big promises. No custody schedules. No co-parenting philosophy discussions. Just a starting point. Honesty, a shared goal to do what was best for the child, together but separately. Over the next few weeks, they built a rhythm. Doctor's appointments, updates, practical decisions. It wasn't easy. Trust didn't come back, but they stayed respectful, civil, focused. When the baby was born, a girl, Ryan was in the waiting room. Lauren handed him their daughter with no words. She didn't need to speak. He looked down at the tiny sleeping face, and something shifted in him permanently. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something close, a surrender to a future that no longer had to be defined by the past. He didn't stay the night at the hospital. He didn't linger, but he did promise he'd be back tomorrow, and the next day, and the day after that. In the months that followed, they continued down that path, parallel lives intersecting at one crucial point, their daughter. Ryan showed up, always, diaper changes, feedings, first giggles, late-night phone calls when Lauren needed a break. Not because he owed her anything, but because his child deserved a father who meant what he said. And Lauren? She never asked for a second chance, never tried to rekindle what they'd lost. Instead, she focused on becoming someone better than she had been. Ryan noticed. He respected it. One evening, while handing off their daughter after a weekend visit, Lauren paused. I know I'll never earn back your trust, she said, but I'm grateful you stayed. For her. Ryan nodded. I didn't stay for you, but I'm glad you're doing the work. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. The pain never vanished. It just dulled over time, replaced by something sturdier, acceptance, responsibility, and eventually peace. He'd lost a marriage, but he'd found a purpose. And in the end, that was enough.